Caru, probably you're muted.
Thanks. Can
There,
you hear me now?
you're good now.
You can hear me? All right. Welcome to Pavana Radhe Sham and Twila, Sundari Priya, Kapilji, Sarabi, Rob in his car there. You look kind of like, yeah. Thanks for joining us. And Govinda Dev as well. So this is a call we've had every week for quite a few months. We're going progressively through the first canto of the Bhagavatam verse by verse. And it's a discussion format. So everybody's welcome to pitch in as much as possible. Yeah, Al Wolf has joined us from Facebook. He said, Rob, you achieved a unique mystical feat of driving your car sideways. According to Al Wolf, who's following us on, there we go. All right, there we go. We're joined also on Facebook by Kamal, Oja, Al Wolf, and Radhe Sham manages to be on both forums at the same time. All right, so if you're unaware of it, we're coming off of a New Year's weekend, which featured the Japathon on New Year's Day, Friday. And our totals, I believe the combined temples, is 4,400,000 names of God, I believe, with about 60 people from Spanish Fork and 80 people from Salt Lake City participating, about 140 people chanting anywhere from one round to, I don't know, I guess Kapil, nobody did more than 108 rounds, did they? Kapil
So
did.
how can I brag? How can I brag about myself?
Well, you can just answer a question. You're not bragging if you're just answering a question. So Kapil did 108, and just below him on the grid that I'm looking at, Govinda Dev, he did 108. So you guys are your Japa Bhais, Japa brothers. And Sundari Priya, who's also on this call, she greeted all 80 guests who came to the Salt Lake Temple, spent as much time with each and every one of them as needed, gave them japa beads, told them how to chant, and did 96 rounds herself. So she's here too. Anyway, congratulations. We started the new year on a good foot. The idea of the Japathon is to donate at least one name of God to every resident of the state of Utah. So we covered the human beings and the pets, I think.
And Charu Prabhu, the award goes to Sundari Priya Mataji.
Yes.
90 times by 108 times by 80 individuals.
We also had two other centers who heard about our Japathon and they wanted to participate. Actually, they said they donated their rounds to Spanish Fork, but I didn't accept them because I didn't think that was exactly fair. But we did donate their rounds to Utah in general. So that was a temple in West London, headed by Chiro Dakshay Vishnu Das. They chanted 290 rounds that they wanted to donate to Spanish Fork, but I put it off into Utah in general. And then a temple in North Carolina, headed by Mitra Sena Das, chanted 139 rounds. So because we covered all the residents of Utah and their pets, that excess, that 290 rounds, 130, that's probably going to go for the animals and the birds in the wilderness areas there.
Yeah. And Charu Prabhu, we know that it's a holy war between the two temples.
Yeah.
But Govinda Dev Prabhu told me that we don't need to rely on donations and charity. We need to be self-sufficient, the Salt Lake Temple, and we have to do our own rounds.
Okay, I didn't get that. Did anyone get that?
Okay, here's the unique thing about Salt Lake City, that we really did not rely on anybody outside. Everybody who walked into the temple or our congregation that had come for Aarti, they're the only ones we counted.
Well, like I said, we shuttled 300 and 400
I'm
and some
still
rounds
getting
to
rounds.
Utah. And also, one of the people who listens to my talk every morning, his name is Rajapati Sutta. I just said, let us know, chant the rounds and let us know whether they're for Salt Lake City or Spanish Fork. And so he ended up giving 64 rounds to Salt Lake City. I don't think he knew the difference. So there you go.
I'm so grateful for Prabhuji's 64 rounds and glorification of the Lord.
So you can't say that you didn't get anyone from outside because
Okay, Haru, we
he,
accept with honor.
So we all
From the other side.
Spanish
I'll
Fork
give
is
you a link.
but with Maharatis and Maharanis like Kapil, Govinda Dev, Sundari Priya, and Omkar, who needs outside help? Got everything we need right here at home.
So we also had, I think, yeah, I don't know if we added Hitesh Prabhu. He said he and his wife did 20 rounds. And
Oh,
I'm not sure if we did Pavana Mataji and Radhesham Prabhu's total.
no, I don't think their names were on the report. I'm sure they chanted
So
rounds, but
Prabhuji, I'm sure both of you chanted because we couldn't keep track of how many people we haven't even reached.
Million.
Omkar had a really good system. He set up a Google Drive spreadsheet, and then I did the same thing. So we were able to. Of course, most of the big guns didn't report to the end of the day, but we were able to monitor the rounds as they added up from all the visitors and people coming and going. So that was good to be able to go and see where you guys were at, and I think you could. Omkar was also able to see ours, weren't you, Omkar?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
all
was really
glories to
good.
Uncle Prabhu. He was really, really on top of that sheet. And,
Yeah.
he could have chanted more 50 rounds, but he was managing all the numbers. So we are grateful for your service, Uncle Prabhu.
Jaya, jaya.
Apart from that, also serving prasadam to everybody while he was chanting. And, we next year, believe me, we need more hands because it was just between Ankar Prabhu and some of us just trying to manage the arti and prasad and also taking care of the guests. So
I
we are
I
grateful.
chanted 50 rounds by noon arti, and then between noon and six or after arti 6:30 7 o'clock, I only got another 14 rounds done because for the same reason, taking care of all the guests. But
You were responsible for a number of rounds after noon, but they weren't your rounds.
that's what I was going to say. So Onkar, he gets a lot of extra credit for his rounds. I don't know how. Sundari Priya, I'm sorry, but you 96 is enough. We're not going to give you any extra credit. 96 is more than enough.
That was late night and early morning. I could not have done anything in the daytime. I barely got to maybe 25 rounds
If we
done.
add to Sundar Priya's 96 rounds, how many rounds she was indirectly responsible for by receiving guests and teaching the chant, it just you can't count that high. So we just
Okay, I take that
run out.
as a blessing.
So Pavana, do you want to read the verse and the first paragraph of the report? Add any comments that you'd like to add by way of
Uh,
starting things off?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhu, shall I
Yeah,
take a moment to introduce one member in our meeting today?
yeah, please do.
We have a new member, Rob, in our meeting. So Rob came to Salt Lake City Temple on the Japathon day, and he chanted all 6 rounds that day. And he told me he is a regular visit, watches the Wisdom of the Sages podcast, and he's very interested in following the Bhakti Yoga path. So I invited him to join our call today, and he is very sincere and he is practicing very nicely. So I thought I will introduce him with all of you. So we have Rob with us today.
Thanks for joining us, Rob. Great to have you. And we've had a lot of people come our way because of the Wisdom of the Sages podcasts. It's first of all, it's done by someone who's a couple young Phil Kustuba and how many of you have watched it? Kustuba and Raghunath. How many of you have watched it? Govinda Dev, Rob.
Yes, me. I have watched.
Yeah, Thomas from Idaho watches it almost every day. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Very contemporary presentation of Krishna consciousness. Did you, Rob, did you see any episodes where they had guests on as well? some of the guests are amazing. I saw the one with Tukaram, Indradumna Swami. There were a couple others too. Very, very good interviews as well. So that's when young people come to the temple. Or when by young, I mean I'm 74. So when I say young, I mean anyone under 50. You could recommend them to watch Wisdom of the Sages. Very good.
I do frequently, and I've watched about 280 episodes so far. So I've seen a lot of the speakers, and like it's really resonated with me. So I'm really glad that I caught on to that. I'm really glad that I'm here in Utah, where I have access to such a wonderful bhakti community. So thank you. Hare
Great.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glad to make your acquaintance, Jai. So do you know what Srimad Bhagavatam is? Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. From Wisdom of the Sages, they take a different verse every day, isn't it? You'd be well aware of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Okay. Someone else is coming in here. Don't have a name yet. Let's see.
So it says Phil Douglas.
Huh? Oh, Phil. Who's Phil?
He joined us last Sunday's call. He was sitting in the temple.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's right. He was sitting right there. Okay, cool.
And Phil, last many years ago, he used to come here, and in the old building, he had done some roof work. He's a general contractor. He had moved east, and now he's back in Salt Lake City, making Salt Lake City as home. And so we are really happy to have him in our Bhakti community here. And welcome, Phil, Prabhu. And this is our little congregation that is meeting every Sunday at 11. So you're welcome to our Zoom calls.
Great. We had pretty extensive renovation of the roof done, I think, around 2013. And so Phil, I don't think he has his audio on yet, but he may have done that. Anyway, apparently it's a good
Yeah, I actually did do that.
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
It was quite extensive. It was definitely in need of it, and you certainly covered it. It's done its job very well since then.
Yeah, I actually did the repairs. I didn't put a full roof on. That was another company.
Okay. No, I don't think we had a full roof done. We didn't have the roof replaced. I think probably just extensive repairs.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's still holding.
Yeah. The building was built in 1957, so it needs its tender, loving care every once in a while. Okay, so Pavana, go right ahead with this particular verse to start our discussion for this week. And thanks for joining us, Bishal, as well.
The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are 4 different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other 3 are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. The second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. as Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth. So the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, i.e., the paths of jhana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge, combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by the oral reception of the Vedanta Sutta, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are three classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third class. The third class devotee, or the neophytes, who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. This is a powerful, powerful verse. I think I'm going to kind of go back to being a psychologist and Jung a little bit. We talked about that before. And he said to have a good life, to be a good human being, you have to have a connection with God in him, absolute truth, God. Because if you don't have that connection and you don't have that personal relationship with the personality of Godhead in your life, you will be lost. You'll wander through life as a lost soul. And if you attach yourself to a material life, that just leads you down a bad path. And I think that's what this is what this particular passage says to me, how important it is to have that personal relationship with the personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. And once you realize him, it changes your life. It absolutely does.
Yeah, Jung is very strong in that. He also says that if you don't rise to the obligation of knowing who you are and knowing who God is and putting yourself in the middle of what God wants to do with your life, you reach the middle age full of regrets, anxiety, even guilt for not having, discharged your duty as you were meant to discharge it. And he says that also people, in order to dull this awareness of their shortcomings, of their having wasted the majority of the human form, in order to dull that, they take to like entertainment, DVDs, television, or even worse, drugs, alcohol, and it's all meant to just pass the time, to relieve them from the keen, sharp anxiety which comes from not having fulfilled your purpose in life. So it's not like you can act whimsically and capriciously and dodge your responsibilities and not have a bill, not have a price to pay. You either step into the shoes that God created for you, or there's going to be there will be significant downside in terms of your psychology. So
Absolutely. And I see that in clients that come in at around 40 and 50 and say, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And they recognize it at about that time.
if you live like in junior high school, we were all there, and it's all about your senses. It's all about nice smooth skin and fine silken hair and voices that sound like the chiming of Christmas bells, smells, sights, sounds. And of course, that in itself is sufficient to motivate you to do whatever it is you do. But like you said, when you reach 40 or 50, the skin's no longer soft. The voice is a little rough. Uh, no boy turns their head to look at a 50-year-old girl. No girl turns their head to look at a 50-year-old boy. So then it's all gone. All those things that you took as your motivators that had to do with the body, how quickly they dissipate, leaving in their stead something which smells bad, looks bad. So Onkar, are you there? Can you explain in layman's terms the four classes which Prabhupada talks about here? The fruitive workers, the gyanis, the yogis. Gyani means mental speculators, the yogis, as well as the devotees. He says three of them are transcendentalists and one are not. Can you break that down a little bit for us, Onkar?
Yes, Roji. Hare Krishna, Pradeep, and Dotnan. Please accept my humble obeisances. So this is one of the very beautiful verses, and here discussions about four classes of humans: the karmis, jnanis, yogis, and devotees. So I also try to reflect in my real life what I see in people. So I see people. There are some people who are very much onto work, like from morning 7 to evening 7:30, 8:30. They just keep working, and they are really attached to their fruits, and they are goal-minded people. And it's not bad to be goal-minded, but they're kind of workaholic and they forget everything of their life and just keep working. And when we ask them, why do you work? And they really, most of them, they don't have any answers. And they just like feels them to work, just work. And I feel this category comes under karmis. They want to work and they want to just enjoy the fruits of their activities, the results. uh, and next part is Gyanis. I guess Bhagavad Gita mentioned about Gyanis that they are attached to understanding God by the power of their mental speculation, and they want to attain to Brahman realization with their mind. And but this category also comes into the transcendentalist category. And yogis are those who follow bodily postures to get their body, mind, and soul aligned, and they focus on the Paramatma feature of the Lord. I guess this will let's discuss in the last week's call. And devotees are those who are always serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead without any personal motive or endeavor, and without any stoppage. That is said apratihata. And there is one more word in that context. So these are the devotees who are always, they are just considering the pleasure of the Supreme Personality Godhead without any personal motive, any personal. So Prabhupada says that devotees are the highest because they are serving directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So jnanis, yogis, and devotees come into the transcendental category, and karmis are those who are in the materialistic category.
So why does he say that three are transcendental and one is not?
I guess because karmis are they are their work of action and morally into the the material world, and they are just into the works of material world and the fruits obtained after their actions. So I guess they are not coming to transcendental category.
There's a verse in 10th canto, Nivrita tar shairo pagiyamana bhavo shota chotamana ka utamashokagana puman virajita vina pashagnat. Said, who will neglect hearing the nectarine topics about Krishna, Mahabharata, Ramayana, the adventures, the philosophy, the kings, the princes, the acts of heroism, the deep knowledge, that who could possibly fail to be interested, at least from a point of view of yoga or from a point of view of scholarship, what to speak of the devotional point of view. The question is asked, who could possibly resist or be immune to or indifferent to or even opposed to hearing the topics of Krishna consciousness? And the answer is killers of the soul, killers of the soul. And that means who don't even acknowledge the existence of the soul, who have no interest in understanding the difference between the soul and the body. And it's almost always the case that if you don't acknowledge your own soul, you're definitely not going to acknowledge soul in the bodies of the lower animals. So another translation of this, another answer to this question, who would not be interested in hearing the beautiful and uplifting and enlightening talks about the personality of God, Krishna? It is the butcher or the animal killer. So as soon as you fail to acknowledge the soul within your own body, then of course you're going to fail to acknowledge the soul within other bodies as well. And what happens is that you start disrespecting life. If you just see everything as physical, then one is not only the killer of souls in other bodies, but due to neglect, one is the killer of one's own soul. So this class of men, they're kind of, I mean, we're going to read or discuss how there are envious, there are innocent, there are devotees. And so, generally speaking, this class of men, killers of the soul and animal eaters, they're not very open or receptive to the science of God consciousness. And devotees are cautioned not to be aggressive. If someone shows a distaste or disinterest, devotees are cautioned just to back off, and because if you're going to be aggressive, you could spark quite a violent negative reaction. So if you just back off and leave them where they are, they're offenders, but they won't become more offensive. What do you think, Kapil?
Thank you so much to both you and Omkar Prabhu for explaining and highlighting the differences between these four classes and also answering this question. Well, one thing that comes to the mind for these four classes, I think the pitfall for the karmis, and that's my understanding, the distinction between the later three classes versus the karmis, that you are not able to break that cycle, because when you are too much focused on the results, the first thing the result brings is the attachments to results. Whereas on the other three classes, as we talk about the Gyanis, they focus to acquire this knowledge. At least you develop that sense that there is a supreme personality. For some, it is impersonal. For others, it is the Paramatma who's sitting in our heart. And for us, it is the supreme personality of the Godhead who has the form. So Prabhupada gives this formula to all of us, that if you really want to lead a God-conscious life and have the right understanding of what is a God-conscious life, then the formula is understanding the Brahman plus the Paramatma plus the Bhagwan. And then there is an emphasis on the Bhagwan. Unless you total these three concepts, it is hard to lead a God-conscious life. Because as I said, that the pitfall for the yogis is you try to, as we say, yujati iti yoga, you try to connect to the God, but then once you know that who's the supreme, who's my father, and he is the source of everything, but you do not want to share with others, that is one of the biggest pitfalls of the yogis. And then comes the bhaktis. They are not only want to connect, but they also have this understanding, the knowledge. Charu, yesterday in your lecture, you talked about one of the verses from the 10th chapter, Tesham eva anukampartham, to show them the special mercy. I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And we are talking about these three aspects. Two of the aspects are clearly highlighted here. One is the knowledge, because we all need to know that who is the right object to be served and to be loved, and who is the object for our devotion. But also that you can make only so much progress if you don't focus on the second aspect, which is the detachment. You can only attach to the Supreme unless you detach. And I was listening to a very nice lecture from Indranand Swami Maharaj, and he said that sometimes people, they feel, as Charku, you gave the example of 40s, 50s, 60s, that for me to lead a spiritual life, I need to give up everything and then renounce everything, and then only I can achieve God. We don't say that. What we say, and Prabhupada's main message throughout his life, he mentioned that you just need to increase the degree of your spiritual life, and that will automatically decrease the degree of your material attachments, the focus on the material things. So that's the analogy I love the most. And to me, it is definitely a formula to lead a God conscious life. Only when I combine these three aspects of Brahman, the next level is Paramatma, and the ultimate level is Bhagwan.
So karmi, which means karma means, we get it from karma. It means people are attached to the results: money in the bank, house, car, material things. That's what the non-transcendentalists focus on. It's what they aspire for. And then moving up to the next level of transcendence, the yogis perform austerities. They may not be big scholars, they may not know the scripture, but they perform severe austerities so that they control their senses. They're celibate. They go and they'll sit in the Himalayas with just a loincloth in freezing temperatures. They'll go in the hot sun. There are all kinds of practices that the yogis do to discipline themselves and control their senses, as a result of which they get punya. They develop a lot of punya. Indra got to be the king of the heavenly planets because of yoga and sacrifices that he did in a previous life. And sometimes Indra feels threatened by particular yogis that have accumulated a lot of punya. He feels that they may overthrow him if they reach a certain level of punya, and so he often tries to thwart them or get them to desist from their yoga performances. And then Krishna says, better than the senses is yoga, better than yoga is knowledge. In common with the yogis, the mental speculators, they don't waste their time in order to get temporary material goods. They want to understand the workings of the universe. They want to understand the nature of the self. They want to understand all the different elements that go into this cosmic phenomenon. And then the devotees, they may or may not be scholars. They may or not be yogis. They're definitely not karmis. All they want to do is serve the Lord in love and devotion. They don't even want to necessarily go to the Lord. They just want to be connected with the Lord through service. Now, my question is, how is it that someone who performs bhakti does not have to try separately for the knowledge, like the jnanis, does not have to try separately for the punya, like the yogis? How is it that bhakti is described here as a complete package? If you have bhakti, you automatically have knowledge, you automatically have detachment. But if you have knowledge, you don't necessarily have bhakti. If you have detachment, you don't necessarily have bhakti. But if you have bhakti, you have both knowledge and detachment. How is that true?
So the example that comes to my mind, and Govinda Prabhu, Sundari Priya Mataji, please feel free to chime in, is one of the Leelas, the Damodar Leela, where Mother Yashoda wants to tie Krishna, the baby Krishna. And the Acharyas, they have explained that you can only achieve God because in the first two, the focus is on your endeavor, like it's on my ability, the effort that I'm going to put in the process. But you won't achieve your goal unless the most important and the second part of the puzzle comes into the picture, which is his mercy. And people who are on the path of bhakti, it's our endeavor, but also Krishna's mercy. And we also see in the Krishna's hands in our day-to-day lives when we accomplish something, or if there is a disappointment, and we reach to a level where even the disappointment seems to be a mercy for Krishna. So from my understanding is the first, second, third path. One, there is a lot of focus on self, and there is too much emphasis on your endeavor, but you won't achieve the goal if the second piece of the puzzle comes into the picture, which is the mercy.
Govinda, are you with us here? Do you have some thoughts on this subject matter? How
Um,
bhakti is more comprehensive than the others?
um, I don't know if I have any wisdom, but me that the reason it's all inclusive is because bhakti is the process for achieving knowledge, which the Lord will reveal within our hearts. But bhakti is the goal. So bhakti is the process. Bhakti is also in and of itself the realization of everything else, because that's who we are. That's the whole point. And that's, if you, I've not been down those paths, but I assume if you were to pursue either path diligently as a jnani or as a yogi meditating on the Paramatma, you'd get to the same place. That's it's the goal. It's also the process for receiving the goal is the goal, which reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Srila Prabhupada. He was once asked by some reporter, what is the goal that you have by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? And he said, the goal of chanting Hare Krishna is to chant Hare Krishna.
That's a good one, bro.
That's a really good one. And I think it's kind of very in a pithy way, at least some response to your question, Sharu.
And Anjali from Facebook, she says she appreciates your comment, George. She says bhakti is who we are. That's the whole point. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Karanai. We are all eternally created by God in order to serve God, just like a father has children, and the children serve the father. The father wants the children to be good citizens, to be well educated, to be honest, to be happy, to be peaceful. The father wants all that for the children, and the children serve the father very, very nicely, and the father's happy when he sees that the children are blessed with all kinds of good qualities. So if we are children of God, then bhakti is our natural function. We're not all going to be philosophers. It's not for everybody. We're not all going to be yogis, not in the true sense. It's not for everybody. But everybody has a seed, dormant seed of love in their hearts. We love our family, we love our friends, we love our dogs, we love our cats. It is said that love is our life. So bhakti just means to take that love as far as it can go, to take it to the lotus feet of the Lord. And if you love the Lord, then you love everybody, because any quality that we're attracted to in terms of spouse or friends or family, that quality originates in God. And so however our love expresses itself, ultimately it's meant to be expressed in an intimate relationship with Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead.
That's great. So I think Phil Prabhu made a comment, so we want to hear from you. It's a very nice, really nice comment that you shared.
Oh, thanks. The first time I went to India, they actually introduced this concept to me. And I actually delved into that concept as something I can really apply and have the direct experience. And what I've noticed is that when the self is out of the way and my focus is on divine, I do what's called the Mula Mantra, Om Sachidananda, Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatma Shri Bhagavati Sameta Shri Bhagavate Namaha. So it contains all the elements of what's been shared here, which I find interesting. I don't know much Sanskrit. I mean, that's about the limit. There's a couple other ones I know, but that's something I've used for a while now, and it allows me to be separated from this self that is the source of all my suffering. And so what I get to do is step back and be the witness of this concept of self and actually be in a place to make a choice. Do I want to be engaged in that, or do I really want to do a simple prayer, which for me, on this new year, my prayer has been, please get me out of the way. Please allow me to be in a place of absolute service. And that's the most powerful prayer I can come up with, because the alternative of that is being stuck in the mind. And being stuck in the mind for me is all in the head, very little from the heart. And my power comes from here, not here. So it's a practice that I'm really making a choice to step into more this year, because I really do want to move into bhakti, absolute service, and keep the self out of the way so I don't get caught in that dynamic, which keeps me a slave to this concept that I'm always trying to control. I hope that makes sense.
That's
It
great.
makes perfect sense. So if okay, let's just say this, okay? Knowledge and detachment are byproducts of bhakti. So if the highest form of knowledge, the greatest, the expression of knowledge, the highest truth of which we can become aware, if it is not abstract. Generally we think of knowledge as concepts, ideas, abstractions. And sometimes, of course, they're useful because we can translate them into, building things. We can use knowledge to manipulate matter. But knowledge of the spirit as apart from matter. And then knowing also the nature of spirit, not just sort of thinking of spirit as some homogeneous, undifferentiated, vast wasteland, but acknowledging that spirit has categories as well. And then getting the clue from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matam savarm pravartate iti madhva bhajanti mam buddha bhava samanvidham. Krishna says, there's nothing higher than me. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the highest. In other words, you know me, you know everything, because everything comes from me, and then I in turn pervade and support everything. So Krishna is saying there's nothing but me, and at the same time I, as the creator, exists apart from the created world. Okay, so then if you know God as a personality, a divine transcendent personality, and you follow his indications in the Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Mata Sarvam Pravartate. That means matter and spirit, the material and the spiritual worlds, both come from me. And that's with all of their majesty and everything that's to be known about them. Iti Madhva Bhajanti Mam Buddha Bhava Samamita. He says those who, how do we know that you've reached the highest level of knowledge? What are the symptoms of someone who's in perfect knowledge? And the answer is Iti Madhva Bhajanti Mam Buddha Bhava Samam. Krishna says they worship me with all of their hearts. That means they don't have to, their search is over. Their search is over. Now they've found the results of mental speculation. They've found the Yogeshwara, that personality whom the yogis meditate within the core of their hearts. So now it's just a matter of the search is, what can I do? What am I uniquely qualified? How am I talented? How am I gifted in such a way as to honor the Lord? I think what I'm trying to do is show how with knowledge, if you accept what Krishna says is that I am the highest level of knowledge, and then he indicates that inasmuch as everything comes from him, he owns everything. He owns everything. So therefore, detachment comes because you know from the get-go that nothing is yours and everything is God's. And so rather than try to enjoy or exploit matter, you recognize that matter is God's energies, and then you want to use those energies in His service. So from knowledge comes detachment, and they're both outpourings or byproducts of bhakti. What do you think?
Well, I know for me as a life coach, that's one of our teachings is to recognize, like, for example, money is not mine. I'm simply a steward of it. And when I practice it from that standpoint, I experience flow in my life like I've never had before. And I think the same thing is true in other areas as we come from a place of seeing that we're not ownership of any of this, that we are stewards of this life, stewards of whatever's given to us. And if we come from that awareness, we can move more easily into bhakti. And you know, bhakti, from my standpoint, is the fastest way to mukti. Now, mukti with liberation, with enlightenment, to me, is not the end in. It's not like a goal to have, because there's almost a transaction there, business transaction. I'll do this for that. It's more of doing it out of the sense of devotion because the love is there. I was very privileged to have a near-death experience at 17, and I crossed over. And I moved into this expansiveness. The best way I can describe it is I was a drop of water put into the ocean. I became the ocean. And the only reason I came back, because I was in such a blissful state, I did not want to come back. The only reason I came back was because his presence that was there said it wasn't my time yet. But it would honor me with free choice. I could stay there if I wanted to. And because I loved that presence so much, I made a choice to come back and discover that I had a mission here. I had an assignment. And I'm so grateful I did come back. But my point is, I moved into this mukti place of having my third eye completely open, recognizing that there is no fear. Fear is a complete illusion, and having full knowledge of everything. I couldn't repeat back to you now what is, you know, what I experienced then, but it was enough for me to open my eyes enough to know that the five senses are very limited. And so that's when I really began my journey. I was actually a teenage alcoholic. A short time later, I got into recovery, got sober, and moved into my journey of expanding my awareness of the truth of who I am. And so it's an ongoing journey for me right now where I'm still doing this. And I really want to move into the awareness of the expression of what I've come here to do. And for me, again, it's that simple desire to be conscious of what God's will is for me, not what my will is for myself. And to step out of this concept of self so I can move into really being much more effective in impacting the world in ways that I've been gifted with, and teach people also with my my life coach program of helping others to get into awareness of their purpose and discover what their gift is so they can also do the same.
Wonderful. I'm just going to ask maybe Sarabi or Vishal, one of you or both of you. It's New Year's. Everybody makes their resolutions on New Year's. And, you know, I respect whatever specific resolutions you've made, but why, for instance, would someone, rather than pray for knowledge or detachment, I'm going to be more, I'm going to search out more knowledge. I'm going to use 2021 to enrich myself with knowledge, or I'm going to use 2021 to be more selfless, you know, do more for others. Why would someone in the Bhakti tradition just say, you know, I just want to deepen my practice. I just want to deepen my service to Krishna. Wouldn't that be kind of separating from the world rather than contributing to the world?
So, listening to, first of all, Hare Krishna, everyone. First of all, listening to everyone, what I was thinking, what it was going in my mind was, when we talk about Gyanis and Yogis, there is a purpose. Like we are going to, and when we become a pure devotees, it's totally selfless. There is no selfishness, like I'm going to give it to, I'm doing these services to a god, and in return I will get something. That that mindset is totally gone when you get to that point. When we are yogis, we are putting our whatever yoga posture to attain something, to control our senses. When we are gyanis, we are looking for the answers. But devotee, the perfect example of devotee I could think of is Mirabai. She did not have knowledge, she has surrendered herself totally to the Krishna. So that was the first thing, but I did not answer your question because I'm not yet there. And when it comes to resolution, I never had any resolution. And Krishna being my favorite god, I am just 45 kilometers from away from Vrindavan. So I grew up in that, not exactly Vrindavan, but still the influence was always there in me.
No, I think you answered the question very well. In fact, you know, Mirabai's in-laws were followers of Durga, and they couldn't stand her exclusive devotion to Krishna. They said, well, why don't you worship Durga as well as Krishna? And she said, well, I don't have to, because Krishna is the source of all other gods of all other worlds. So if I worship Krishna, then Durga and all the other demigods are satisfied. But this was their family tradition, and they tried everything to coerce her to worship Durga along with Krishna. And it's just like, it's like asking a wife, well, why don't you also go out with this man? Why do you just stay with your husband? Why don't, he's also a good looking guy and he has a good job. Why don't you go out with this other guy too? So Mira took it in that way. Krishna was her husband, and bhakti means, among other things, exclusivity. It means faith and devotion at the lotus feet of the Lord. And so one thing that she said, which is revealing, this goes to what Govindadev said, bhakti is who we are. I mean, that's who we are. So Mirabai, when her relatives screamed at her, why don't you also, take a part of yourself, compromise a little bit, chill, and go along with worship of Durga, just to create peace in the family. And we can imagine those were sort of some of the arguments they made. Mirabai picked up a clay pot and she said, do you see this clay pot? Do you understand the clayness of it? Do you understand the clayness of the clay pot? So can you think of the clay as separate from the pot? Can you take the clayness out of the pot? She said, similarly, you can't divide or take the devotion that I have from Krishna away from me, because it is what I am.
That's great. Thank you to both of you. Great example. Vishal, if you are okay, we want to hear from you as well.
It's okay if you just want to listen and check it out, but everybody has something to contribute. Doesn't matter. You don't have to be a full-on devotee. We'd like to hear from you wherever you're at. Anjali, in the Facebook section here, she quotes, the seed of devotional service fructifies and becomes a transcendental creeper. Finally, it reaches the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual sky. This seed is obtained by the mercy of the Lord in the Guru. By the Lord's mercy, one gets the association of a bona fide Guru, and by mercy of the Guru, one gets a chance to render devotional service. Devotional service, the science of Bhakti Yoga, carries one from this material world to the spiritual world. And this is the role of the Guru also. If there is a very exalted person, Krishna says, I'm the source of all material and spiritual world, so I think that qualifies as an exalted person. You can't approach them directly. That's not possible. You have to observe the protocol of going to their servant who passes you up to another servant, to a 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 servant. Similarly, if Krishna is the absolute truth, knowledge of Krishna is the highest knowledge, and if knowing Krishna, you automatically become detached to the things of this material world because you know that they belong to Krishna and you use them in his service, then the only access to Krishna, the key that makes everything fall into place, is the bona fide spiritual master. You could, the people that we've met in our lives has always been because somebody closer to that person, am I wrong, introduced us, right? Kapil, you're in Goldman Sachs, so the head of the whole country, the head of Goldman Sachs USA, comes to Salt Lake City. So I don't know if you know him or not, but let's say you know him. So how many of your co-workers are going to say, introduce me, Kapil, introduce me, introduce me, right? They know that if they went up, it would be taken as pretentious. It would create a negative impression. And he doesn't have time anyway. But you're down on the ground. You know those people who are doing a really good job. You know those people who should come to the attention of the head of Goldman Sachs America, because these are the people who can, who currently give the most to the company and service, and who you would recommend to be promoted so that they can do more. Isn't it a fact that if it's personal, and if the person is exalted in wealth or fame or strength or knowledge or humility, we have to avail ourselves of someone who's closer to that person for the introduction. If it's
That's so true. It's so true. And it's such a great example. I think talks about both our material as well as spiritual endeavors. So going back to the example of the head of the organization, a lot of people you say that, okay, I know him. And that's what we say for Krishna as well, that we are trying to know him. But the bhakti is almost the other way around, that we have to do something that he knows and he sees us. Like we have to do something that the head of the organization knows us. And similarly, on the path of bhakti, it's not so much only about the knowledge, because that you can attain in the other paths as well. I think it takes to the knowledge piece to the next level, which is the understanding. Like in our relationships, with our spouses and friends, and often we say very loosely that, oh, don't tell me, don't I know you? I know you very well. And it's not about knowing, it is, do you really understand me? And once you understand me, I think that's the true knowledge. It's not the knowledge and understanding, it's the other way around. So, bro, that's a great example. Thank you so much.
And those who are dear to the Lord are not necessarily the smartest or the best looking, not necessarily those who've had the most aristocratic birth or the most connections. Those who are dear to the Lord are those who are most devoted to him. They may have imperfections of character, like Bhima in the Mahabharata. He clearly had an anger problem, but he was completely sold out to Krishna, and so he was very, very dear to Krishna. Yudhisthira, unlike Bhima, was very analytic. He was very restrained, dignified, imperial, monarchical. He would never tell a lie. He was the son of Dharmaraj, the god of justice, the god of truth. And he was also a devotee. In fact, at one point, because he wouldn't tell a lie, he actually offended Krishna slightly. Because he wouldn't tell a lie on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it caused him to actually suffer somewhat in terms of moral stature. So you have almost two polar opposite people, but because both of them are Krishna-centered, both of them are sold out life and soul to Krishna, either one of them is a spiritual master. Either one of them is capable of leading others back to home, back to the lotus feet of Krishna. Krishna himself says, "Abhichet suracharo bhajate mamananyabhak." Even if one is does the most abominable action, still if he's 100% devoted to Krishna, and he continues to move forward, improving himself, then he's to be considered saintly because he's rightly situated. Who else can we? Govinda Bhakta, you want to tell more about how natural it is to perform bhakti for all living beings across the board?
Well, can I make a quick comment what Phil Prabhu said? I really loved that analogy, and that reminded me what the example Charu Prabhu you shared a couple of weeks ago about what we heard from Vai Mataji. And Phil Prabhu, Vai Mataji is the source of Charu Prabhu's energy. Um, so Phil Prabhu, as you said, the need versus contribution, I think it's a great piece that Mataji mentioned, Charu Prabhu told us about a few weeks ago, that there's a lot of emphasis on, okay, what I need from a relationship, from a project, from a work, whatever. And she almost said the other way around, that you don't need to say that. You need to ask the question, where am I needed? And I think that is a big mantra of philosophy, the bhakti philosophy as well. Is it's not the level of the service, the credit that comes with the particular service. It's where am I needed the most, and how can I contribute that? So thank you so much, Prabhu, for reminding us that example.
Here's a description of Haridas Thakur. He chanted, we just came off the Japathon where we chanted 4.5 million names of God. As it took 140 of us, and Haridas Thakur chanted single-handedly every day 300,000 names of God. And this describes his character. It says, Pandit Haridas is described as being very well behaved, tolerant, peaceful, magnanimous, and grave. In addition, he spoke very sweetly. His endeavors were very pleasing. He was always patient. He respected everyone. He always worked for everyone's benefit. His mind was free of duplicity, and he was completely devoid of all malicious activities. Now, this is the key here, this next sentence that Prabhupada writes, and maybe you could say a little bit more about this, Omkar, after I read it. Prabhupada writes, these are all originally qualities of Krishna, and when one becomes a devotee, they automatically become manifest. What does that mean, Omkar?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I also remember one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 5th canto in Prahlad Maharaj verses that says that one who is practicing devotional service automatically gets all the qualities of demigods, and one who is not devotee or not a devotee of the Lord, he has no good qualities, uh, however good he be. So I guess that is the one that confirms, I guess, the statement.
And Govinda, back to you.
Well, those are all godly qualities, and I again reminded of one of my favorite sayings of Srila Prabhupada, that if you take a piece of iron and put it next to a fire and hold it there for long enough, eventually it's no longer iron, it becomes fire. That's what Prabhupada said. So if you're chanting all the time, and I think maybe I had, along with many others, a small experience of this over Japathon. It's the first time I've ever chanted that many rounds. It does have this effect, and I won't try to glorify myself by talking about it, but it really works. And you get to a point, or I at least reached a point where it was very, very difficult to stop chanting, because it's so satisfying just to be immersing in the mantra. And so Haridas Thakur, who was chanting more than any of us chanted for one day, he was doing that every day. I expect that he was realization of all godly qualities, because he was in doing so, he was bhakti. He was realizing himself. So he just became the fire.
Can you told me something last night about, you quoted Grateful Dead, and I thought that was really neat. Could you just share that with us again today?
Yes, well, I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead. A little self-disclosure. You know, ordinarily you think that the band is playing the music, and there's a nice lyric in a Grateful Dead song where that says that you reach the highest moment when the music plays the band.
Wow.
And I think when you're chanting, and it doesn't necessarily happen in 16 rounds, but you get past 32 rounds and you're kind of in the golden zone, and then the chanting is kind of the rounds are chanting you. And you really feel like you're serving the mantra in a way where you're kind of less personally present in the process of chanting. So, you know, the music plays the band, the mantra plays the devotee.
Wow.
Kind of thing.
Thank you so much, George, for great example.
Haribol.
Chabu, you're on mute.
Do we have a volunteer to read the next paragraph of the report here? Anybody?
Oh, I can read.
Go right ahead.
So, I just confirm, where did you leave at?
I think it's a third class devotee.
I thought as much. Thank you. A third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative source of Bhagavata. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavata is the message of Godhead. The third class devotee, therefore, has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns their livelihood by the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukdev Goswami, like Sut Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for all around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing, so one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy message of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man, who spoils them as the serpent spoils the milk, simply by the touch of his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature like the Upanishads, Vedantas, and other literature left by the previous authorities of Goswamis for the benefit of his own progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless, and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of the devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Panchratra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such message from the Vedic literature, one can see all pervading localized aspects of the personality of Godhead within his own self consistently. This is called samadhi.
Comments? Anybody?
So this reminds me an example of Prabhupada that in one of the lectures, there was a person sitting, it was, I think, in Paris or London somewhere. And this person, after the lecture, she stood up and she said that, Swamiji, do you know where I come from? Or what I was in my last birth? And sometimes we have those kind of inquiries. And then there are a lot of professional people to entertain those and answer those queries that will take away from the subject matter. So it's not only on the honest on the guru, it's also on the disciple to have the right inquiries. We are not asking people not to inquire. The inquiries are the great thing to develop and strengthen our understanding, but we need to know that who's the right person who can satisfy that urge or give us the true knowledge. So coming back to that example, Prabhupada diverted, he asked the other person to ask other question, and the person got offended. After a few minutes, she raised again and she said, Prabhupada or Swamiji, do you know who I was in my last birth? And at that point, Prabhupada said that I know that, but that doesn't matter where you come from. The thing that matters the most is where are we heading towards or going towards. And I think that's the thing that we are discussing today.
Coming back to scripture, Krishna is recognized as the Supreme Personality of Godhead throughout the Vedic scriptures. Ahamsa, just like I said, Ahamsa Rasa, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Podiam, Paramambiram, Purusham Sasvatam, Adi Deva Jamriyam. Arjuna, after hearing the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna in the 10th chapter, he says, you are the Param Brahma, you are the Supreme Spirit, the Supreme Abode, the Supreme Purifier. You're Purusham Adi Divyam. You existed before Brahma, Shiva, the moon, the sun, the stars. And not only do I accept it after having heard from you, but all the rishis, Ahushtam Risha Sarve Devashir Asitonara Swayam Chavavrisime, all the rishis, and there are scriptures which appear to glorify different deities as being the supreme. But let's put that into context. If you're in Joe Biden's cabinet as a Secretary of Defense, that means you're in charge of the Army and the Navy. So all the service men and women in the Army and the Navy, they see you as supreme. In fact, probably they call you the Supreme Commander. To them, you are God. You're not God. You're just in the cabinet of the president. But in your area, in your department, you're God. And those men and women in the service, they have to follow what you say. Not what Joe Biden says, but they have to follow what you say, as if you were God. They can't go over your head. They can't go to some other and say, well, he said to do this or he said to do that. No. As far as the Department of Defense is concerned, the Secretary of Defense is the supreme commander of all the armed forces. And so there's nothing wrong in all the manuals and all the literature published by the Defense Department basically as saying Secretary of Defense is supreme. But if you look at the whole corpus, the whole body of literature regarding the United States of government, you understand that that person is supreme only in a limited field. Similarly, Brahma created the universe. 80% of the people you ask who is God, they say, well, he's the creator. So by the sentimental idea that most people have is who is God, Brahma would be God. And yet there's millions of universes and millions of Brahmas. All of them are simply created from a part of Krishna. So the point that's being made here is that we didn't make it up that Krishna is God. It is confirmed by all the scriptures. Shruti, Smriti, Paranadi, and any other conclusion than that Krishna is the supreme commander of all commanders. He's the God above all the gods. Any other conclusion is going to cause a disturbance in society. So devotees of Krishna, they may appear to be basing their belief in Krishna on sentimentalism. People see them singing and dancing in the street and they think they're just sentimentally picking Krishna out of a lineup and sentimentally and arbitrarily worshiping him as God. But nothing could be further from the truth. There's so much philosophy, there's so much corpus, there's so much body of knowledge. And we're going along with the authorities like Arjuna, like Shiva, like Brahma, like Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya. The process of loving Krishna is an authorized process according to all the Vedic scriptures. And even if you look at the Bible, the Judeo-Christian scriptures that we have, what specifics are we given about God? What specifics are we given about him? We're only told he's all powerful, he created everything. But that's a position, those are his powers, but who is the person who wields the powers? So even if you go to other scriptures, you don't find any contradiction as far as Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, Prabhupada said, we haven't come to challenge any scripture, but Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam are supplementary to and complementary to all the other scriptures that we have. Phil, you seem to have arrived at a lot of good conclusions, kind of based on your own soul searching, your own getting in touch with your conscience and all. How does our constantly referring to authorities, the scriptures, the authority of the scriptures, the authority of the guru, how does that sit with you in general?
I think authority has just come about as a result of what's been delegated from the Supreme and from the awareness that, like Kapal, his last word he used was samadhi. I feel like samadhi is the result of Krishna consciousness. And Krishna consciousness can actually be experienced in a way by making a decision to step into a level of bhakti, a devotion, to where it's like dying to the self every day and making that decision that I'm wanting to have connection to source in a way that can allow me to be liberated from the constant egoic nature of the mind, which keeps us very much enslaved and seeing things in a certain way that keeps us in fear and anxiety all the time. And so I think that was very helpful for me to have that experience I did early on, because it allowed me to see what my natural state is. And from my standpoint right now, we all have access to mukti. We all have access to awakening. It is our natural state. And from that standpoint of it being our natural state, what I'm doing is just removing the blocks and barriers and illusions to that awareness. And I can best allow that to happen by getting out of my mind and focusing on one of being of service, like what was already said, asking, how can I serve today? Having that be a continuous question. How can I serve today? How can I get out of my own way? And I'm always led. That's the amazing thing. I'm always led. I have a whole lifetime experience of seeing how my most intense experiences of what I viewed as tragic have turned out to be the most beautiful growth experiences that have allowed me to get to a greater awareness of what truth is, and to step out of my own way. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is the awareness too of like a lot of this, what's being shared, even though I've been to India several times, I've got this beautiful 4 foot or about a 3.5 foot statue of Krishna out in West Virginia right now. I actually gave to myself 3 birthdays ago when I was in New Delhi. I sent it to out here. I had it in Utah. Then I went to West Virginia to set up a nonprofit. So it's there right now. I got to get that and a few other things. One of the awarenesses I have is there's one of the yogas is actually the yoga of knowledge. Yani, is it called? What's it called? The yoga.
Jnana yoga.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what I'm wanting to do, is actually listen more when I talk, because I notice that my talking can get me out of what I can learn here. And so I'm very new in this. And so that's really where a lot of my focus is going to be, is listening and learning and being a sponge. And like, I love the topic today, Bhakti. It's perfect for me to start this new year out, because I actually wear, this is one of mine, is Hanuman. I've got a necklace of Hanuman on, and Hanuman is my guy, where I'm really, you know, wanting to move into more of that energy and just allow myself to be guided by Krishna consciousness and Hanuman energy, of where I move into a greater level of service.
Wonderful, wonderful. We really
Ah,
appreciated your joining us, your comments. You were going to say something, Govind, today?
I just said Jai. I loved everything, and look forward to getting to know you better. I'm glad you're on this call.
Thank
We've
you.
got, we've got,
be here.
let's see, there was a question, it's gone out of my view right now, but he asked, where are we reading from? We're on the 11th verse, 2nd chapter, 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And next Sunday, we'll be on the 12th verse of the 2nd chapter of 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So everybody's welcome to join us either on Facebook or through a Zoom call, and also to take a look at the verse, learn what you can from it, and offer us your comments and insights. We're going progressively verse by verse through the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then of course you've noticed that we use the Gita a lot for reference material. So having a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and a set of the Srimad Bhagavatam, at least on your phone, if not in terms of paperback, would be very, very helpful in following these discussions. Hope that everybody who was with us today joins us. From Facebook, we have our wonderful supporter, Ram Kishan, jumped on. You'll see him there as Roshan Kanpur. He has been our great friend and supporter for over 40 years from Los Angeles. He's given so many gifts and provided so much support for both the Spanish Fork and Salt Lake temples that we are forever in debt to him. He comes on and says, Dandavat Pranam. He says, he mentions you, Kapil. He says, very nice, Kapil ji. Like that. And Anjali loved that comment that you made, Kapil, when you were quoting Bhai Bobby. Says, not what are my needs, but where am I needed? If we could just be in that mood, just ask that question. You know, when I first met Roshan in Los Angeles, I was Life Membership Director. This is probably 1982. He just arrived in Los Angeles. He did his business, import business, a little bit in New York, a little bit San Francisco, but then finally decided that Los Angeles was the place. He came and he established his business in Los Angeles. He just arrived, you know, and I met him in the LA temple. He came up to me, and again, this is 40 years ago, and he said, where am I needed? Those are the first words after he said, my name is Roshan Kanpur, my wife is good. Where am I needed? What can I do? That's a devotee. And from him, they weren't just words, because for 40 years, he has done whatever we needed done. For 40 years. That is bhakti, ladies and gentlemen. It's the desire to serve, and it's extended, prolonged over 40 years and still counting. Yes, Anjali likes that. Ram Kishan personifies that. Yadunandana came on and says, Hare Krishna, Patrick from Reno. We've had 18 comments, and also those who have liked. Anjali, Sanjay Sharma, a very often visitor to our forum and our classes. We have Bhagavatam classes Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Sudarshan Chakra is on board. Sumadura Nanda Sutta, thanks for joining us. Patrick, as I said, from Reno. Kojraj Singh Devraj joined us. Kusham Deeman. Raquel, our volunteer here, Chris Castro's mother. Raquel has joined us from Stockton, California. Good morning, Raquel. Of course, Onkara Ber Montes. And the one who wanted to know the verse we're in is Zen Gagan. Thanks all of you for liking. You're welcome to share. You're welcome to put these discussions on other forums, share them with other groups you may be part of, make a comment, and join us next week either on the Zoom call. We post the meeting ID in the comment section and the password, or through Facebook Live. We welcome your comments and your questions. So that about wraps it up for the day. See, New Year's was January 1st, so that wraps it up Sunday, January 3rd. Thank you, one and all, for joining us. The closing kirtan is going to be done by Radhe Shyam. And if anybody has any final comments, just go ahead and type them in the chat and send them to everyone. Govinda Dev just said, ask not what Krishna can do for you, ask what you can do for Krishna.
That's good.
Johan wants to say something. Johan wants to say something.
Sorry. I was wanting to say about the resolutions thing. I started this about 4 or 5 days ago. I started doing 16 rounds every day, and
Haribo!
now I feel way better. I have like my brother. He only does 6 rounds, and now I way like to tease him. So because he's always like putting me down, and he always teases me, and now I have one thing to make to tease him.
Yeah, be sure you hold that over his head.
Thank you, Charu. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Pavana, for the initial kirtan, Radhe Sham for the final kirtan. Thank you all. Govinda Day for joining, Omkar, Phil, Rob had to leave us a little early, Sarabi, Vishal was here earlier on, Anjali, Patrick, Yadunandana, and so many others here who were on the Facebook and commented. I think it was a good session.
Absolutely.
Hope you agree with me. I'll look forward to seeing you all same time, same station next week when we discuss the 13th verse in the second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Everyone, thank
Krishna
you.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare.
Hare.